So we've talked about this topic at the very beginning of the series, but I want to elaborate on it, and then we can kind of have a solid basis that we can move on from there. The layout page, it allows you to create a common Chrome around your web page, which allows you to just focus on the main area of every page in the view files themselves, the CSHTML files in the subfolders that are named after your controllers. So if I were to, in this case, I'm in my home controller, I just create a new project called RenderBody page section example. Sorry for the long name, but hopefully it'll be descriptive and it'll make sense once we get to that point. I'm going to right-click the word index for the action result index method and select add a view. And you'll notice here, we've done this a couple of times and just blown right past it, but we can use a layout page, but if we leave it blank, it's going to use the _view start file. So I'm going to go ahead and add an index view in the home folder of the views. And you know, when we do that, it creates several other folders and files and things of that nature. And if you take a look in the views folder, there's this viewstart.cshtml page, and it has this razor section where it sets the layout equal to view shared _layout.cshtml. So what does this mean? Well, this view start file can be used to define common view code that you want to execute at the start of each view's rendering. This file is a hard-coded convention, so that means that it's built into the MVC runtime. The MVC runtime will look for this file for instructions on which view layout to use. Now, because this code executes at the start of each view, we don't need to explicitly set the layout in every single individual view file. So that's why we don't have any reference to the _layout.cshtml file in our index.cshtml file, right? Now we can add it here if we want to override whatever the default is that is set here in the viewstart.cshtml. And here's the cool part. Because the viewstart allows us to write code, we can optionally make our layout section richer by adding logic rather than just doing a simple property set like we're doing here by default. So for example, we could vary the layout template that we use depending on what type of device is accessing the website. And we could have a version for the phone or tablet that's optimized for those form factors, or we could have a different layout that's optimized for PCs and laptops. Optionally, if we were building a content management system or some common shared application that's used across multiple customers, we could select different layouts based on the customer, or maybe based on the individual user or their role within the system. So if in the case of a different customer, different company, we could change the branding for our application and use their colors and their logos and things like that just by adding another layout page and then changing those branding elements in that layout page, and then at runtime figuring out that, oh, this user is part of this company, so let's give him that company's layout page, right? Pretty cool. So this enables a lot of user interface flexibility. It also allows us to more easily write view logic one time and avoid having to repeat it in multiple places. So as we noted previously, the layout.cshtml page, so the _layout.cshtml, is generated for us by the scaffolding whenever we added a new view. And the layout page uses this RenderBody helper method to define the area that the view will be injected into. So right here at the very below this div tag with a class equal container body content, and right before this horizontal rule, everything that's in the body of our index.cshtml will be inserted. So in this case, just an H2 with index in between. However, as we know, we could blow that out and add a lot of extra information there. So really the layout.cshtml is kind of like a master page if you want to think of it in terms of ASP.NET web forms. I believe we talked at length about those in the previous series that was a prerequisite to this series. Also, we talked about the use of the underscore. Why do we have underscore layout and underscore view start? I think we talked about that at the outset of this series. We said that it'll hide those files from view, so I'm not going to go into all that explanation again. We also saw that you can pass information from a view or from the controller into the layout through the use of the view bag, like we did here with the title. The title is being set here on line number 3 of our view, and then being used here in the title of our layout page on line number 6. Now, the only new bit of information that I can really add to this is that there can only be one RenderBody method per layout page. So now I think I've said everything I can say about the layout page as it stands right now. However, I will say that there are other ways to get information into the layout page besides just rendering to the body or just through the view bag. So, for example, let me go into my index.cshtml page, and I'm going to copy in 2 sections of code here right below the index area. So I'm creating a section using the @section keyword, header, and then creating a razor block of code. And in the header, we're going to add an H1 with our section header title, and then we're also going to create another section called scripts, and in its razor body, it's going to have these 2 scripts for jQuery and the bootstrap min.js. Okay. Now, let me just make sure that those aren't already part. Looks like they are. I'm going to actually strip them out of the layout.cshtml page just so we can see them inserted by our view rather than just being a part of the layout.cshtml. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so now in the layout.cshtml page, what I want to do is go here and add beneath the render, or actually above the render body, I'm going to add the following: RenderSection, and I'm going to use that same name that I used in the index.cshtml. So in this case, header. And then I'm going to say, is this a required field or not? So I'm going to actually use a named property and say, hey, that's true. You have to have the header section for your page. And then here below the div tag, I'm going to add this render section. And this time, maybe you could guess that I'm going to call this scripts, because that's what I named it in the index.cshtml. And I'm going to set the required equal false on that one, so we can kind of see how these work. All right, so the required property that we're passing into these render section methods indicates whether or not that section is actually required in our view that we're passing in. So if I were to leave out the header here in this header section inside of my index.cshtml, I would get an HTTP exception with additional information that says something like the section's not defined : header. Okay. So render section allows you to poke information into spots, various spots in your layout like we've done here. In addition to RenderBody and RenderSection, there's also something called RenderPage. It allows you to insert an entire page into our layout. So when I say a page, I mean an ASP.NET Web Pages page, not web forms, not MVC, a web pages page, like you could create with Web Matrix. In other words, this is a non-MVC page, but it can still contain Razor syntax and C# logic. So to test this, what I'm going to do in the shared folder is actually add a new file. So give me a second here. I'm going to add a new item, and I'll go ahead and select the MVC5 page, but I'm going to blow away whatever template it gives me, so we'll just use that because it'll give me the right extension. Click add, and again I'm going to get rid of everything inside of there. Okay. Now inside of this page, what I'm going to do is actually paste in some code that I've created here off to the side, and I'm simply going to have this is from test.cshtml, and then I'm just going to do a simple loop and just insert the values 1 through whatever, I don't even know. I'll worry about that in just a moment. Notice that I'm using the underscore convention here because I don't want somebody snooping around my folder structure and navigating just to this page outside of the /home/index route. So that's why I did that. Notice that also I'm using this page data object to retrieve values that will be passed in using one of the overloaded versions of RenderPage. So in our index.cshtml, what I'm going to do here is right underneath the index, I'm going to go add RenderPage, give it the page that I want to use. So let's give it the ~view/shared/_test.cshtml. And then you can see in IntelliSense that we can send in an array of objects. So we're going to give it a comma delimited array of objects that'll be accessed here in test CSHTML. You can see that here I'm going to get the first value out of page data, and here I'm going to get the second value out of page data. This first will be a number, so like for example, let's use 12. So we can complete this for loop by saying as long as I is less than 12, then go ahead and iterate another time through our for loop. And then here I'm just going to have some prefix text, something like my prefix, and then whatever the value is, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's go back to index.cshtml, and we're going to give it those two elements of the object array. The first one will be the number 12, and then the second one will be my prefix, and this has absolutely no real value in the real world. I mean, it's kind of a silly example, but hopefully you'll get the idea how you can access the page data values by passing them in through our call to render page and working with that array of objects. Alrighty, so let's give this a shot. Okay, so we can see this is from test.cshtml, and here's that loop that we created with the data that we passed in from our call to render page. Also, let's see if we saw our section header title rather. Yeah, we did. We saw that as well being passed in. Great. So the only other thing I want to say about layout pages is that I can override the default layout page on a specific view on a view-by-view basis. So let me create a new layout page. I'm going to, let's put this over here, and I'm going to right-click on the shared folder, and I'm going to select add a MVC layout page razor, and then I'm going to call this test layout. Right? So we'll call this test layout and click OK. And so in the index.cshtml, well, actually, let's do this. Right here in the test layout.cshtml, I'm going to do an H1 and test layout page, so we can't miss it. And then here in the index.cshtml, I'm going to go and right below the view bag title in line 3, I'm going to add line 4 and say layout equals, and then ~views/shared/test layout.cshtml, what we just added. And now let's save this and run it. If I spelled everything correctly, it should work. Whoops. Oh, notice that I don't have sections in my layout called header and script. So I have one of two choices. I can either add them to the test layout, or I can remove them from the view. So for right now, what I'm going to do is just comment them out using the razor commenting out syntax, like so. And now save it and rerun the application, and it should work this time. And there we go, test layout page. Okay, so great. Hopefully that was that made a lot of sense. So in this lesson we talked about the different ways to define a layout, how to inject content from a view into a layout using RenderBody and RenderSection. We looked at how to include an ASP.NET Web Pages page into a view or a layout using the RenderPage method, as well as how to pass arguments to it to give us that my prefix and 0 through 11. And finally, we saw how to override the default layout on a view-by-view basis. All right? So doing great. See you in the next lesson. Thanks.